Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. I hope the week's gone well. Let me start with macro thoughts. This is an article in Business Week. The chaos cycle, Powell speaks, Trump tweets, China reacts, markets freak. First, of course, is Donald Trump, who has rediscovered his power to send markets soaring or into a tailspin with less than 280 characters on Twitter. Then there's the US Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, who repeatedly finds himself on the receiving end of nasty Trump tweets for abiding by his mandate to do what's best for the US economy, which isn't necessarily always the same thing as what's best for the sitting president. And in Beijing, it's Xi Jinping, the president of China, who sits atop a communist party in which politicians and central bankers famously sing from the same hymnal, at least when the audience is outside observers. The financial markets have been like a mosh pit where these three players bang against each other. Really interesting article. All these questions are arising in the dog days of summer, a time of year when Wall Street's vacation calendars are jammed and the markets seem especially easy to rattle. So that's the background to what we witnessed this week, a significant escalation in my view, but we'll come back to that. In May this year, I wrote a piece about China-US war ballistic, and I said the markets then, that was at the end of May, are still pricing in a benign, but much less benign than a month ago, outcome. And we need to consider what a non-benign or even maximum non-benign outcome looks like, I asked. And I think since that period you've seen, if it's a continuum of 1 to 100, you've seen us move more from 0 towards 100. The question is how much. Then I came across this tweet from the president. As your president, one would think I would be thrilled with our very strong dollar. I am not. The Fed's high interest rate level in comparison to other countries is keeping the dollar high, making it more difficult for our great manufacturers like Caterpillar and Boeing. And this Monday I wrote, President Trump keeps talking about weakening the dollar. I find it curious that such a stable genius has yet to calculate that a strong dollar is infinitely better. And if he is serious about his warfare strategy, he needs to add currency warfare to his tariff, sanction, and linguistic warfare arsenal. And I said my perspective about the dollar is this, and note well, it's just a fraction under its 2019 high, even after a rate cut. There is very little President Trump can do. In fact, the risk is that when the market sees he's powerless, the dollar might lift off like the proverbial parabola. To that thought, Santiago AU Fund, the day Trump goes on TV and says something to the effect, if the rest of the world wants to continue devaluing their currency to take advantage of the US, fine, we'll just let the dollar rise and see how that works out for them, is the day he wins every negotiation going forward, to my point. And actually, I think the economy is far more solid than President Trump's now hysterical tweets would suggest. However, with the Yuan and this week's movements indicate he is in a trap, not of the Federal Reserve's making, but of the Yuan's. June this year, I was talking about how being a paramount leader is a double-edged sword. This is all on Xi's shoulders, said Trey McCarver, co-founder of the Beijing-based research firm Trivium in China. Xi has personally said he would handle relations with the United States, and at this point he has failed. Those relations are spiraling out of control. And I have to admit, after watching events unfold this week, we learned why Xi is the paramount leader. And the message was delivered via the Yuan, with finesse and delicacy. And I hope President Trump and Steve Mnuchin heard that message. This is the Yuan's wildest week in years, ends with the whimper as panic fades. Have a look at that chart. As I said over the weekend, the most important currency to watch is the Yuan. A zero hedge, China can't cut rates and ease to boost negative PPI as food prices are exploding. China can't halt soaring pork prices as half of its pigs are dead or slaughtered. Can't raise the yuan to ease the highest CPI in 16 months as it is currently devaluing in retaliation to Trump. China's soybean oil futures were limit up, hitting the highest in a year. I was reading some more about Alberto Giacometti, whose sculptures I adore and love. And in this exhibition, which was shown, I think, last year at the Guggenheim, it says about him, he investigated the human figure for more than 40 years. And I thought, don't we all? Giacometti was born in the Swiss village of Borgonovo. He moved to Paris in 1922, pursued a deep interest in cubism, fascination with the unconscious, and dream imagery that led to his association with the Surrealists. African, Cycladic, Egyptian, and oceanic art captured his attention as well, influencing the formal development of his figures. Best known for the painted portraits and distinctive sculptures that he created in the late 1940s, unflinching in his portrayal of humanity at its most vulnerable. My favourite is Walking Man, but then the others that you're seeing here are equally beautiful. An orphaned Iraqi boy made a drawing of his mother on the floor and slept in her arms, 2011. Wow. I missed my mother when I saw that. Roadblock ahead, The Mentalist. I haven't been on the road for such a long time. I must go. Salman Rushdie describes Kashmir as a tiny valley of no more than 5 million souls, landlocked, pre-industrial, resource-rich, but cash-poor, perched thousands of feet up in the mountains like a tasty green sweetmeat caught in a giant's teeth. Arundhati Roy, earlier this year, Kashmir is potentially the most dangerous place on earth, the flashpoint for nuclear war. Indeed. And then look at this, Modi gave a firm warning to the separatists and terrorists that they're designed to disturb Jammu and Kashmir by creating a sense of alienation and fear under the garb of Article 370 is not going to work anymore. The problem is he was addressing Kashmiri youth in his tweets and in his TV speeches, but since he has cut off their internet and their cable TV, it looks like, suspiciously, he's just feeding sound bites to the international media. And I really believe that the 3 places that you have to look at, one is Gaza, it's occupation, of course, then you go to Kashmir, and I think the majority would say that's an occupation as well. Then you go to Xinjiang, and you have 3 different iterations. Let's go to Italy. Matteo Salvini, Italy's hardline deputy prime minister, tore up the populist coalition last night and demanded a new election as he set out to govern the country alone. You know, I used to trade Italy in the 1990s, and the government would fall every 9 months, so this is hardly news. Italy's 10-year BTPs blew out more than 20 basis points. But then this is a 6-month chart because it's been an almighty Wizard of Oz level move. As I said, as I wrote in the Wizard of Oz world, that article, these are incredible levels that we're seeing in the bond markets. German 10-year yield dropped as minus 0.59% in a risk-off move after those developments, of course, in Italy. And that confirms that bonds remain in tilt mode. Let's move on to Merkel was snapped on holiday reading Stephen Greenblatt's study of Shakespeare's villains, The Tyrant, a dissection of the infantile psychology and unquenchable narcissistic appetites of demagogues. Lovely article in The Atlantic. At 67, Suu Kyi was poised and striking, a flower tucked into her long black hair, which was streaked with grey. A picture of Mahatma Gandhi looked down with a serene smile. The meeting was a high water mark for three historic figures. Obama had just decisively won a second term as president. Clinton, then Secretary of State, was about to prepare her own run for the presidency. Released from house arrest in November 2010, Suu Kyi had just been elected to the Myanmar parliament in a by-election that her party had won in a rout. And then talking about Myanmar, she's the daughter of Aung San, who led the country to the brink of independence in the 1940s, had become a potent symbol and international icon of resistance against the military junta and the repository of the Burmese people's remaining hopes. She had no interest in being an icon. I've always been a politician, she said. This is my favourite bit. After the meeting, as Obama's motorcade snaked through a throng of Suu Kyi's supporters, many of them holding posters with her face on it, he said something in the back of the limo that has stuck in my mind. I used to be the face on the poster, he said. The image only fades. And you know, I know there's a lot of critique about Obama, but just in that one sentence, you see the man, and that was a very sophisticated brain behind it. The only real prison is fear, she famously wrote, and the only freedom is freedom from fear. Very good article, have a read. But took me back to Bob Geldof, who said Aung Suu Kyi took the greatest prize humans can give to another, and then becomes one of the great ethnic cleansers on the planet. According to Dan Scavino, who's the president's social media wizard, the president was treated like a rock star inside the hospital, which was all caught on video. They all loved seeing their great president. Barack Obama. I used to be the face on the poster. The image only fades. And I recall President Obama describing the presidency thus. He said, it was like being a train driver. The rails are laid and the direction set, and the president can speed up or slow down, but nothing more. Look at this clip by David Inglis, Hope for the Best, Prepare for the Worst. It's about Hong Kong, and I've written about it several times, and I think Hong Kong is obviously fundamentally different from Xinjiang and from Kashmir, of course, much more sophisticated, higher per capita GDP, and live feeds from all over the world just on Hong Kong, which makes it difficult for the Chinese to respond aggressively. But in this interview, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. The periphery I wrote in June is a boil that will not be last. And I also have written severally about how the Chinese tinderbox is the periphery. And you saw in Paul Nantalier's article, which I quoted yesterday, the idea of the periphery is a very, very central thought in the mind of the Chinese leadership. And this is The Economist's front page via Sun Chartist. And the point is this about the street. Paul Virilio, the revolutionary contingent attains its ideal form not in the place of production, but in the street, where for a moment it stops being a cog in the technical machine, and itself becomes a motor, machine of attack, in other words, a producer of speed. The Crown Prince's power play from Benghazi to Assab and Khartoum, the UAE's strongman, has emerged as a key player in regional conflicts. The world has woken up to the dynamic and ruthless Abu Dhabi Crown Prince and Deputy Supreme Commander of the UAE Armed Forces, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, MBZ, status as a quietly dominant figure on the world stage and in Africa in particular. The most powerful Arab ruler isn't it's MBZ, said a recent New York Times headline. This has long been evident in several African conflict zones. I wrote an article and I referenced, the idea of how they were going to bring Turkey to heel, which was to control the yield curve, bring Qatar to heel, could apply to Turkey as well. Control the yield curve, decide the future, was a plan to construct a big short on Qatar. And I said if the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi should have spoken to me, I could have told him how to do it. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar 112.02. Dollar index 97.61. Japanese yen 105.83. The yen is beginning to worry me because it's trading very strong. It's bounced, however, twice off 105.50, but if it breaks that, it's going straight to 100 in my view. Swiss franc 0.9740. The pound, where are we? 120.105. We dipped below 121. Negative growth in the last quarter, minus 0.2%. Aussie, which confounded me with this big bounce it's had, 0.6812. India rupee 70.5115, South Korean won 12.1040. I missed that. That was a great short. Brazilian real 391, Egyptian pound 16.5595, and the rand 15.0755, and in trouble in my view. Suddenly the idea of pound parity seems far less far-fetched as the risk grows that Britain may crash out of the European Union without a deal. Options-based calculations show a 5.6 chance of pound-dollar parity in the next 1 year. I think that's a bit of a buy. Markedly higher than 0.2% in early March, when prospects of a no-deal outcome were seemingly off the table. There is now a 30% chance that Britain will exit the bloc in October without a divorce agreement, a Bloomberg survey of 13 banks showed last week. My core view is that there will be some kind of extension that is just about the most likely outcome, but I'm far less confident in that than I was at the beginning of the year. I thought there was just a 5 to 10% chance of a no-deal Brexit by the end of March, whereas now I think it is close to 50-50. Market should be more worried. And I wrote about this over the weekend. I spoke about Black Wednesday, 16th of September 1992. I recall that day in slow motion and as if it were a newsreel. I was then on the trading floor at Credit Suisse First Boston, and the speed of thought and execution I witnessed that day I never witnessed again ever. As I watched the pound fall like a stone, I could not help wondering if this sterling moment is precisely like it was in 1992, a no-brainer. Last week the pound traded below 121 and is now in danger of taking out its post-referendum low, 118.60. After which the only significant landmarks left will be a low set in 1985, and then only a few cents lower parity. And in that same article, I was quoting Daniel J. Hannan of The Telegraph, who said Boris isn't bluffing. Every action, every appointment, every word since he entered number 10 signals the same thing. Britain is leaving the EU on 31st of October. And I said the key question is this: can Prime Minister Johnson self-eject Britain? Can he be stopped? This is a political calculation. Prime Minister Johnson is elected to take quite properly an impossible is nothing, can-do political posture. But the bottom line is, can he swing it? If he can swing it, then he has to face down the whispering death. That was the nickname given to Michael Holding, who was thus nicknamed because he was exactly that when he opened the bowling for the West Indies. And I'm saying the FX markets are whispering death. Dollar index 97.549. We're doing a lot of work here. Euro dollar's proving very sticky, last at 112.05. A Boeing code leak exposes security flaws deep in a 787's guts. He suggests a hacker exploiting those bugs could represent one step in a multi-stage attack that starts in the plane's in-flight entertainment system. This is the weak spot, isn't it? It's a lot of articles I read, particularly after MH370, and extends to highly protected safety-critical systems like flight controls and sensors. An attacker could potentially pivot from the in-flight entertainment system to the CISMS to send commands to far more sensitive components that control the plane's safety-critical systems, including its engine, brakes, and sensors. This is a reminder that planes, like cars, depend on increasingly complex networked computer systems. They don't get to escape the vulnerabilities that come with this. Last time I wrote about Boeing was in March, after the 737 MAX 8 Fly Ethiopian 302 crash. Gold, let's have a look at that, 1503.50. Big run up this year, hasn't it been? Wow. And really, I don't follow my own line of thinking. As the world got more dangerous, it was clear gold. The interest rates coming down to zero, the cost of holding gold is then a free option. So, disappointed with myself. 17th of June, I wrote an article, What's Happening, Brother? And in that article I was saying another big happening is the crude oil market. Here, two powerful gale forces are at work. I was talking about the downshift of demand, and I was saying we're facing demand destruction, and that this penny dropping has dragged the oil price down versus the Iranian geopolitical risk. But clearly, oil poised for a second weekly loss and is signaling to us that it's all about demand destruction now. I learned that cobalt, which has collapsed from $40 to $15, and where Glencore's shuttering mines, a semi-rare metal that derives its name from the German word for goblin, was given its moniker by medieval miners who frequently came across its noxious ores in their hunt for silver and gold. 50% drop in prices this year. Cobalt has turned toxic for Glencore. And he's made a great comment about how he's not OPEC, Mr. Glazenberg. With demand escalating, China's near monopoly on rare earth production and processing could give it significant political leverage, GIS reports. The $8.7 billion emerging market local debt ETF saw the biggest one-day withdrawal in its history yesterday of $322 million. And that's exactly what I was writing about in October, about the China EM negative feedback contagion loop. Proxies battle over Tripoli, says Africa Confidential. There's a stalemate on the ground while each side's foreign supporters use high-tech weaponry to try to change the strategic balance. In the meantime, misinformation and disinformation have become as much weapons in the conflict as aircrafts, tanks and missiles. The war is good publicity for Turkey's growing drone industry. Yet the main drivers of the conflict are now Turkey and Qatar backing the GNA and the UAE, Saudi and Egypt behind the LNA. It is not just a drone war, but arguably the world's #1 proxy war. Talking about Eid and a $500 foreign exchange allowance for 2019, major handout, though too late for Eid, dollars can be bought at the official rate and then sold through the black market for around 2,000 as a profit of 1,300 Libyan dinars. Triple or quadruple the average monthly household income. I wrote about Gaddafi's body in a freezer, what's the message, in October 2011, and clearly, as he said, he described himself as a cork on Africa. John Donne, therefore, send not to for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. Sudan, from revolution to realpolitik, Africa Confidential, neither side likes the deal. The generals want to play for time, and activists see it as a first step to power. For the thousands gathering in central Khartoum, waving flags and sounding horns around the Friendship Hall, constitutional declaration installed on 4th August was far from the revolutionary victory they had sought. It had taken 4 months since the overthrow of Omar al-Bashir, Houdini, tortuous negotiations, mass sit-ins, and enduring murderous attacks by the security forces to get here. I've called it the Oud Spring in Khartoum, and I said the zeitgeist of the revolution in Khartoum was intoxicating. As I watched events unfold, it felt like Sudan was a portal into a whole nother normal. I was quoting Hugh Masekela, who said, "I want to be there when the people start to turn it around." I said, Sudan is a Masekela pivot moment. Ethiopia grants first financial services license to foreign firm. Ethio-Lisa's new license signals Prime Minister Abiy is moving ahead with the economic reforms he pledged when he took office last year. The company will lease equipment such as MRI scanners, tractors, drilling rigs to companies that can't import such equipment themselves due to foreign exchange shortages. The bureaucracy in Ethiopia is overwhelming, he said. If you want to succeed in Ethiopia, you need to be patient and persistent. I wrote about Prime Minister Abiy in July 2018, when things looked a lot rosier. And I said he needs to execute real quick on the economic front, but if he levels the playing field, a whole troop of folks will be looking to pile in: Ethiopian diaspora, their own citizens, foreign investors. Glencore's Mopani copper mines in Zambia has closed 2 shafts, and an opposition leader says that's led to 1,400 job losses. It's a perfect storm in Zambia. Last November, President John Pombe Magufuli took cashew marketing out of the hands of private traders who refused to pay the price he demanded for raw cashew and bought in the army. Yet the nuts are still largely unsold, and I'm sure they've gone bad. I remember when he said, "I've launched an economic war." July this year, I was writing the proof of Magufuli-nomics will be in the eating, and surely we will know whether the cake it is baking is a growing one or a shrinking one. South African all-share up 5.31% year to date. 10th of June, I said, add into the mix a very soft Q1 and a China-South Africa feedback loop which is undergoing a trend reversal, and we have some ingredients in play pointing to a further slide in the rand. To it, one currency is missing out on the EM rebound, you guessed it. Amount of risk the rand is carrying at the moment, people may not be willing to carry it over the extended weekend. Rand was at 15.1121, its weakest level on a closing basis since September 2018. Rand is also the most volatile currency in the world, with the 1 week implied volatility climbing a 4th day. Dollar Rand, this is a 6-month chart. Egyptian Pound, 16.5620. EGX30 up 8.78% year to date. Nigeria all share down 12.74% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange down 7.35% year to date. Burundi malaria outbreak at epidemic levels as half of population infected. 1,800 people died since the beginning of the year. We are less than a year away from the presidential election. President Pierre Nkurunziza, who is facing many crises, does not want to recognize what could be considered a failure of his health policy. Almost 6 million cases have been recorded since the first week of January to the end of July. Cannabis real estate firm Bangi Inc. to apply for cross-listing in Kenya in response to investor interest in Yahoo Finance. Acquires and leases specialized real estate assets in the cannabis, hemp and CBD industries today announced its board of directors has approved an initiative to cross-list its common stock as depository receipts on the NSE. A dual listing in Africa would be a natural step for the company, considering its corporate name Bangi means marijuana or hemp in Swahili, one of the most spoken languages in Africa. Kenya, talking about 300 million EAC, same size as US, the opportunity to use seamless payment systems such as M-Pesa and Airtel Money. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Have a look at the report. Kenya shilling 103.25, Nairobi oil share up 4.81% this year, NSE 20 at a 10-year low minus 9.77%. Thank you for stopping by.